Welcome to another edition of Speak Up Presents. Tonight we're going to be talking about the 2008 election ballot initiatives that we're going to see in the state of Florida on our ballots very shortly in November. And we have with us as our panelists today, welcome to Dr. Rich Brown, who is the incoming president of the League of Women Voters.
Of Hillsborough County.
Of Hillsborough County. Thank you very much.
All right.
I'm glad you could be here with us today.
Thank you for having us here.
And Mark Hart, who's also with the League of Women Voters. Welcome, and I'm glad you could be with us today.
Thanks. Here as Voter Services Chair.
Okay, thank you. Let's take them one by one and talk about what we know about them and maybe what the pros and cons of them are so people can make an informed decision. Okay, so we have number one, Declaration of Rights.
It was originally put in to discriminate against Asian immigrants to keep them from being able to inherit property. And there were a number of those put in 100 years ago. At this point, only Florida and New Mexico have that on the books, and both Florida and New Mexico have constitutional amendments to take that off.
And what it does is prohibit an alien, a person who's not a citizen, from inheriting property. If it stayed on the book, that's what's on there right
but
now.
It's an old piece of law that made sense 100 years ago when there was a lot of discrimination based on racial issues.
Right.
And this just cleans it up, takes it off the books. It's actually a very simple one, and it's easy to take a position on.
Except for the way it's written, to me. Because what it says is proposing an amendment to the state constitution to delete provisions authorizing the legislature. You know what I'm saying? Because it says to authorize the legislature, but on the other hand, to delete their authorization.
Right.
So that's what I find a little tricky about when they do language like that, because it almost sounds like if I vote yes, in some way, some people could think they are continuing to discriminate. What it says here is if we vote yes, we don't want them to discriminate anymore on the basis of, they're not being a citizen.
Right. So a yes vote takes out a provision that is biased and discriminatory.
Okay.
As opposed to the next amendment where it's just the opposite. But let's do number one first. Mark?
Okay, Mark, what about
There are some concerns about the language in Amendment 1 because some of them, there is some concern that voters will think this somehow supports illegal immigration or undocumented workers or whatever, and that is not the case at all. The language in the Constitution is very archaic. What it says is it would enable the legislature to prohibit the ownership of real property by aliens ineligible for citizenship. Well, no one is ineligible for U.S. citizenship based on race. So the language is just archaic and really needs to go, and it's somewhat symbolic. Mm-hmm. But it is a vestige of Jim Crow, and Florida shouldn't be proud to be among the last states in the nation to still have this on the books. Many states had it 100 years ago. When there was a huge influx of Asian Americans to California and then dispersing out around the country. So it does clean up the Constitution and take something out that's really a vestige of a bygone era.
I want to just get into this because this probably part of this is that the League has taken positions on some of these amendments, or all of them.
Right. The things I'll be relaying tonight are the positions that the League of Women Voters of Florida, the state chapter, have taken a position on. Generally, the League is very conservative. We're certainly nonpartisan. We don't support any political party or any political candidate. Mm-hmm. Most of our work is to get information out to inform the citizens so they can make an informed choice on amendment issues. That's what we're doing this evening. And to provide forums. That's some of the work that Mark did recently, both in the county and the city cable, where the different candidates for office came together and answered questions from a panel. So we spend a lot of time informing and educating on certain issues that have implications for civil rights, the League will take a position and make a recommendation. Yeah. And as you can see from Mark and I, there are now a number of men that are members of the League of Women Voters, in large part because it's a tremendously good way to be involved in politics on a local basis, not partisan politics, but the whole process of democracy. And the League, of course, was started during the suffragette movement, which had as its first goal to gain the right to vote for women. It did that, and that's where the strong civil rights and non-discriminatory traditions of the League came from. So when we take an opinion on an issue, it is after, oh Lord, an awful lot of time of debate, going back to the pros and cons. It was interesting for me when I joined the League how different the process of coming to a consensus was in a room primarily full of women as opposed to guys, because we'd have hammered it out in fairly short order, and we may have made an impulsive decision and not gone through all the nuances. It takes longer for the League to take a position, but when it does, it is quite nuanced and is very well grounded in the traditions of the League. I like that a lot.
I'm sure you have something to say about that, Kathy. Is that true or not?
And I'm sure that a lot of people got this, people who are members of the League of Women Voters, and the voter had a spreadsheet and encourages people to understand these things themselves. The League's idea is that you study issues before you have an opinion. How novel is that? You actually get as many
Don't wait till you get up there and then you have to
Yeah,
try to
and-
read this because
and
the
what they
language
did,
sucks.
But what they did here is they give
Yeah.
you a description of it, and then they didn't even, at this point, when this was sent out, they didn't give recommendations.
Okay.
It was up to you to still search the issue, to study the issue, and do it, because that's what the League of Women Voters is about. It's about making an intelligent decision and learning as much about an issue before you make a decision. And so that's pretty much what he was saying.
I think that's what I said.
Certainement, I agree.
Yeah, certainly.
Okay. All right. So on number one, we the League is in the position of saying yes on that, and so are
Yes.
some of the other organizations as well, are they not?
This
I
one,
didn't see
almost
whether
everybody agrees that this is yes.
That this should be a yes.
Right, this is almost a housekeeping issue, clearing up something that's 100 years old.
Yeah, some old language, some archaic
Right.
language that doesn't belong there, and that should have been taken out before but wasn't. And that's,
Right.
that's
I mean,
it's almost like a Scrivener's
we let
issue.
Asian Americans make all our vitamins, all our toys, all our babies' clothes. Why we wouldn't let them inherit property is beyond me. Excuse me.
It's
Okay,
from the old days.
that was not your opinion. I know.
Right.
Okay, let's go to number two. I did do a show on this one with the pros and cons, but why don't you guys just all jump in
Mark,
and
you
explain? Mark, you want to start it off?
Well, this is one of those very interestingly named amendments, the Florida Marriage Protection Amendment. Who could be against protecting marriage? And what this provides for is marriage in the Constitution as only the legal union of one man and one woman, and provides that no other civil union will be recognized as marriage. And this is the only citizens initiative on the ballot. It's sponsored by floridaformarriage.org. And I certainly am getting a lot of emails about it. It's probably the most notable measure among the amendments that are on the ballot in terms of public interest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been getting plenty of emails, and of course I did a show on it. But the pros and cons, have you, do any of you want to speak to that?
Well, I think that there's a couple things here. One of them is when you're looking at constitutional amendments, the Constitution is supposed to be a broad document, and it's a document that speaks to general policies for the state and general principles and things that the state believes in. And after you have a Constitution, you have the Constitution provides underpinnings for statutes, for ordinances, for all other kinds of things that are done. So the first question that you want to ask is, does this language belong in the Constitution, or is there a more appropriate avenue to express this sentiment? Is it more appropriately in the statutes, or does it belong in the Constitution? So that's the first question you're going to have to ask yourself. If you decide that it belongs in the Constitution, then you need to look very carefully at the language. one of the things that we see in city, county government, local government, in our own family, sometimes we make decisions and we have what is known as popularly as the law of unintended consequences. And you think you're going to do this, and holy moly, it did that. And so the question is, how clear is the language in any one of these amendments so that it's not going to create a situation and cause undue harm? Now, there's an awful lot of discussion going on out there that this language, not just in this state, in a similar language that's passed in other states, has had some very confusing results, has triggered a whole bunch of litigation, and that some other people are questioning whether or not they're going to be able to have some of their rights. This has been expressed in Florida by groups like the AARP. Has expressed some concern about
and being opposed to it.
They're opposed to it. So I think one of the things that you do is that you read the language yourself and you decide, do I like it or not? If you don't like it, it's a real easy decision. If you decide the language, I like the concept, how is it written, and is it confusing? And frankly, we were kind of joking, people joke, these are very serious issues now, you shouldn't joke about them, but we're human beings, and so, God gave us all a sense of humor. And so you go and you look at it and you say, it is a marriage between one man and one woman. So you say, does that mean that if you're divorced, you're really still married and that the other person can't get married again, or you can't get married again because it's just one and one? That's it. That's all you're going to get.
The old Catholic law, too.
And then it triggers a whole cascade of things that can or can't be done because you don't fit whatever this description is.
Now,
so people need to read that carefully and see
I
if
did a show on this, which they talked about, well, of course, the proposers of this amendment are aiming at making sure there's no unions between gay couples, correct? I mean, that's their whole motivation. But this will affect retired people, as the AARP is pointing out. It'll affect people that are maybe in one household. And today I just got an email just before we went on that the Orlando City Council has just approved giving gay rights, giving benefits to the partners of its employees, whether they're gay or married or not.
Right.
And that this kind of thing, this amendment, if it went through, could affect and impact all of the different businesses that do, in fact, extend medical and insurance
domestic benefits.
Yes, thank you.
And it already has in some of the other states where this has been, or a similar thing has been passed. In one of the things that I do is psychology, and in part of my time I spent time at Tampa General, both in the emergency room and at the burn unit. And the issue of somebody that has been a common law heterosexual or gay couple coming in with somebody with an accident, with severe life-threatening issues, and they've been absolutely the closest to that person for 20 years, lives with them, talks with them, knows what their goals are, but if they didn't, even if they did fill out a health care surrogate form, they couldn't be involved in the health care decisions, and it's catastrophic and devastating. And often when the person, if the person that had the injury survives, they're furious that the person they love and have been with for years were not able to be involved in the health care decisions. And that's, that is one of the consequences of this. It has real impacts. My mother-in-law lives in John Knox Village, and the two people down the hall from her are in a common law marriage because each would surrender fairly significant pension incomes if they were to get married.
Right.
But now they wouldn't be able to have hospital visitation or be involved. And there are unintended consequences that are profound. The League has taken a position on this.
And its vote no.
It's in opposition with this. The League believes, and here's our language, that no person or group should suffer legal, economic, or administrative discrimination, and that we should have equal rights and opportunity for all. So the League is very clear in opposition to this amendment. It's ironic, Amendment 1, we support removing a discriminatory thing, and Amendment 2, puts in a discriminatory constitution, and so it's ironic. But we are in favor of the first one, opposed to the second one, and both times equal civil rights for all. We've had to go through it with women, with minorities, especially African-American minorities here in the South, and now the issue is
Well,
gay couples.
I'm amazed that the ERA isn't on here. But then again, Mark, you look like you
You're gonna go there, are you?
Well,
Say something about
there's
that.
some history to this. I don't think a lot of people realize how common it is for companies to offer pension and health care benefits to unmarried partners living together.
Right.
In the 1990s, the Holland and Knight law firm, headquartered here in Tampa, made headlines statewide for being one of the first major corporations to offer that. Today, the city of Tampa offers its employees, and those programs may be in jeopardy if this amendment passes.
So it's pretty much a no.
Absolutely,
I'm
I
with you
know.
on that. Okay, let's go to number 3 now. This one is changes and improvements not affecting the assessed value of residential real property. Okay, want to explain this one? Who wants to take the lead on that?
You up for it, Mark?
Go, Mark.
Sure, I'm an emergency management guy, and I think anything that improves property to withstand hurricanes ought to be done. Unfortunately, property appraisers are awfully eager to increase the assessed value of your property if you put on
Don't pick on them. It's not
deck
that,
or-
don't say they're awfully eager. I mean, they have
Well,
to
I think it's...
assess value. It's not fair.
They're not collecting the money anyway.
Then let me rephrase that.
Yeah.
I think
Be
we
nice.
should encourage. I think we should encourage people to do improvements that help their homes in Florida withstand hurricane force winds. And also at a time when this country is having major economic issues about reliance on foreign sources of oil, we should be encouraging people to use renewable energy sources. This amendment would say if you make an improvement to your home along those lines, it won't affect the assessed value of your property. You won't pay higher taxes for
Right.
those types of
So in other words, if
improvements.
we put shutters on our windows, or we
Right.
put
Harden your home.
harden the home, or we do, when you say renewable energy source, so that
No,
if
that's
they
not
did, if you did, does this have anything to do with solar panels?
Absolutely.
Yes,
It does.
ma'am.
So if someone did put solar panels up on, they could be assessed at a higher rate
It would.
unless this goes through.
It would
Because
increase your property
It adds
value.
value.
Right.
See, remember what I said earlier? You decide whether something belongs in the Constitution or it doesn't. The Constitution is to give guidance to the legislature, and this is what the people of Florida believe in, and then they pass laws. The specific reason for this, and the reason the League endorses it, is A, it belongs in the Constitution to give guidance to property appraisers because they are told to assess the market value of the home. So if you make all these improvements by hardening or making it more energy efficient, you've enhanced the value. But then if you enhance the value, you're going to have to pay higher taxes. So what this is saying, Constitution saying to the legislature, hey, it's okay for them to increase the value of the home, but they don't have to pay taxes on that increment of increase because it's for good reasons. It's for a good public policy that the people of Florida
And
endorse.
Kathy, why do we want it in the Constitution versus having it just as a law?
Because the law right now, the way the Constitution describes valuation,
Oh, it
they
already
don't-
does that.
It does, yeah, and they don't, and so this is already fits with what the Constitution does. And what it does is give guidance to the legislature when it's giving direction to the property appraiser. The legislature believes in this, I think, I'm sure they do, but they can't do it because it would not be constitutional. This helps them do it.
So the league has taken a yes position on this?
The League has taken a yes position for 2 reasons. The hurricane protection increases safety, so we're in favor of that. The other part is it encourages renewable energy, and we support that. So for those 2 reasons, and those are the 2 parts of this thing, hurricane safety and renewable energy, both those things the League is in favor of, so the League recommends voting yes to Amendment 3.
Now, did Tax Watch also take a position of yes on this? or
Florida
no?
Tax Watch supports Amendment 3 and the next 3 amendments we're talking about, all of which relate to taxation. On the con side of this issue, local revenues would suffer. Local property tax revenues could suffer under this.
Well,
The
they wouldn't
savings-
suffer, they
the
wouldn't increase.
Savings may
It's
be
not like they're
minimal.
going to take something away, they're just not going to allow
Well, I'm for this, so
Right.
I'm just trying to point out that there is a con, and the savings to property owners may really be minimal, and it doesn't apply to new construction. So opponents of this measure are using those three arguments.
Right.
And like I said, that's for it.
Yeah,
There you go.
yeah. And they're bona fide arguments. If it's worth doing, let's do it to new construction too.
And not only that, I thought, in fact, that they were going to issue, and they have over time, issued different credits
Right.
to homeowners for doing this, and didn't we just, I just had one of those My Safe Florida home inspections
Right.
done on 2 properties, and that was great. You know, they came out and they assessed the wind damage, and then they gave me a report telling me what I could do to harden the home. But then you've got an expense, and unless you know, there are some either state or federal laws out there that allow some rebating or something like that, or credits, some of these things are expensive to do.
Yeah,
So if you had to face that, the
Yeah.
expense of making the changes you need, and then also additional
pay
taxes,
taxes.
you're probably going to not do it.
Yeah, I have a friend that's an architect down in Miami, and when I asked her about this, why it did not apply to new construction, she said the incredible hassle of trying to figure out what it would cost to build simply to basic code versus adding on and getting a really strong hurricane-proof house for new construction and trying to subtract that difference out of the taxation value of a new construction house is just so complex and actuarially tedious that she thinks that's why it got dropped for new construction from this.
Plus, new construction isn't there a whole bunch of laws that are coming down
Well,
right
there's
now?
basic code, yeah.
And the new codes, though.
Yeah, there's new code, but there's all
Yeah.
kinds of hurricane hardening and renewable energy you can do above basic code. The
Okay.
basic code, which is all after Hurricane Andrew, is much better than it used to be.
Right.
But there's all kinds of cool things you can do to safety.
All
your
right,
house.
so the league's a yes on
Yes on
Amendment
3.
3. Okay, let's go to number 4, property tax exemption of perpetually conserved land. I just, you know, as a word lover, I just, don't you get fascinated with how they write these things? Okay, perpetually conserved, perpetually.
Perpetually
Yeah,
preserved land.
Not just for a day, but
Not for a day.
perpetually. It's like a
Right.
candle or something.
Yeah, and I don't know how you can unperpetualize land. I'm sure there's a legal, technical way to do that. But the way this, there's perpetual, you know,
Yeah, I think it's de-perpetually.
till death do us part. Well, it turns out there are
Is it
ways
divorce?
to
You
get
can
out.
divorce
yeah, there
your
are
land,
ways to get
too?
out of
You're
that.
back on 2.
Oh, I'm back on 2.
Think of perpetual as forever.
Yeah, we could do divorce is only between one man and one woman. But let's get through this election first.
Okay, so
For-
this means,
Okay, this means if you happen to have some land, say you lived in the middle of the state and your great-grandparents left you 4,000 acres of Pasco County, if you were to put that in a perpetual conservation state, this would then reduce your tax value of that land. Right now, the land can be taxed, not necessarily if it was full of Fishhawk Ranch, but it can be taxed at what the reasonable use of it might be, which might be agricultural land. If you made it a perpetual conservation,
I wouldn't even have to put any cows on it, is
you
what
wouldn't
you're
even have to
saying.
you
I
wouldn't
could
even have to
just-
rent a cow.
Okay, go ahead. And I could just call it this,
You could call it that, you'd have to file some papers,
right?
and then the ad valorem taxes, which are a huge block of the taxes you pay for property, would not then be assessed on that land.
So
That's how
would
I
I
kinda
virtually
read
pay
it.
no taxes at all?
A little.
A little bit of taxes?
Yeah.
Okay, how do you read this, Kathy?
The league opposed this one, as I recall.
Yes.
And I recall some of the debate on it when this was being discussed. And part of the reason for opposing it is the lack, that it's still a little, some people view it as still a little bit too fuzzy, that they really don't know how you would, what would be the definition of a perpetual conservation easement. And in a perpetual conservation easement, there's some degree of clarity there, but then, or other perpetual conservation protections. And then people go, well, what does that mean? And so it's not understood what those words mean. So again, while we all support and are very, very strong to, we hope, to conserve lands, especially now because so much of Florida is being gobbled up, the law of unintended consequences still could peek its ugly little head here, and you pass something that you think is going to do that when you're doing the opposite. And the reason, as I recall, for some of the discussion around this before it got on the ballot, and the reason for the League's opposition, as I recall, is the lack of clarity and the fact that the general protections that could be implemented may not be at all what you might want.
Well, that one sentence right
And
in
remember,
here
when,
is
when,
just
when you're
really
getting something in the
confusing.
Constitution, it's there, and the people of Florida have to live with that, and you can't just run and change it the next year. So before you vote, when I go in to vote, even if it's voting for whatever, it can be the best thing in the world that I believe in strongly. My inclination, my feeling is to vote no on everything, unless there's reasons for me to vote yes. Because it ought to be tough to get in the Constitution. I think that's why they increased the percentage to get things changed. It should not be easy to amend your Constitution.
So you didn't vote for the protection of the pigs a few years ago?
No.
Okay.
Pigs do not belong in the Constitution.
I wondered
That's
that
ridiculous.
myself.
And the things do not, when you're going to vote on something to put in your Constitution, you have to have a higher threshold of value attached to that. Even if you believe in it, if it doesn't belong in the Constitution, it belongs in the statutes or it belongs elsewhere, or ordinances or whatever. But so when
But
you're...
there's no way for citizens, now these were brought up, not all of them by citizens though, right?
No, this was Reform Commission.
Right, only Amendment 2
Was the only one.
is a citizen initiative.
But isn't the only way for citizens to make an impact on law to go in this manner to a constitutional amendment? I mean, if they can't talk their representatives into making changes in law, then this is their only recourse, correct?
Well, some say that that's why so many initiatives came about. People were fed up. They tried to get a certain change. Now, class size is always the poster child of that.
Right.
And they tried and tried and tried to get it in statute, and then they just threw their hands up and said, you know, the heck with it. We're going to stick it in the Constitution. So there, you know,
Right,
and that's how it happened.
Right.
But there is some frustration, but you know, you just keep going back and going back. That's what the legislature is for.
Right.
And you know, they're the ones who are supposed to be doing the laws. Laws don't belong in the Constitution. Constitution should be a constitution.
I should set philosophy
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. Mark, you had a point on this one as well?
There is some wiggle room in here. As it reads, it subjects the assessment benefit to conditions, limitations, and reasonable definitions established by general law. Well, that's pretty vague. How will that all shake out? So that's to Kathy's point. Environmental groups are lining up in favor of this, obviously. Anything that would conserve lands, they would tend to favor. This would also be of benefit to the state program Florida Forever, which preserves natural lands. But owners of lands perpetually to be conserved already get federal, state, and tax breaks. And of course, this amendment doesn't require public access to the lands that are perpetually conserved or defined as conservation areas, which I think would be a drawback. I'd like to think that if we're going to have something like this in the Constitution,
And we're going to
it
give
would
somebody a
provide
tax
somehow
break.
for people
Right.
to
Right.
access
You'd think
these
that
lands.
they would be able to go on and use it as park or something like this,
Yeah.
or
And-
trails or something?
Sure. Florida's got a tradition, for example, the beaches,
Right.
of property that's set aside for the benefit of everybody, even though it can be sort of difficult in some areas to fight through the hotels, but you can walk down any beach. Here, it is nice that it might encourage people that own the land to put it into a conservation situation. That's a reason to vote for this. Some of the reasons that the League used in coming up with the recommendation to oppose this as our formal policy is this is not linked in any way to the master planning process that has been mandated by the legislature. So this is not required to fit with any master plan for any county or Swift Mud area of the 13 counties.
So if I were loaded maybe and I wanted to take my land in Pasco County and I called it this and I could pass it into my trust
Right.
fund and
Yeah.
100 years from
Yeah.
now some kid could sell it and make a lot of money.
Well, we don't know.
I mean, that's kind of what this
We don't
will
know
do.
what
This one
perpetual
doesn't-
means.
Yeah.
And that'd be the issue. Now, giving these extra tax breaks above and beyond what are already tax breaks has some harm to the general population because it reduces the tax basis. So there's less taxes for the county and for the city and for the state. However, the citizenry gets no benefit from that. There's less taxes available, but we don't get to access the land for any conservation, even hiking. Or they can say, yes, you can put the Florida Trail through here, and next year they can go, no, you can't. And I've hiked a lot of the Florida Trail, and there are places where people turn access on and off from year to year. And so there are too many problems with the way it's written and the law of unintended consequences. Therefore, the League has taken the position that we should not support Amendment 4.
And the tricky thing is that the environmentalists may not understand, may react quickly and say, oh, good, this gets us
Yeah,
more conservation, and they may not have looked at it well enough to realize that the impact of it is,
right. And it might. And it was
pretty negative, actually.
It was a pretty spirited discussion when the League at the state level came up with this recommendation. There were a lot of folks who took the, yes, we ought to do it to encourage conservation. I belong to some conservation groups, and there's a pretty spirited discussion within some of them too. And some of them are in favor, some of them aren't. But the League says it's too murky, and the consequences are not clear, and sort of following Kathy's idea, boy, if you're going to put it in the Constitution, which pretty much sets it in stone, it's hard to unset it anyway. You better get it right and be real clear and have thought it out. We don't think this is clear enough or well thought out enough. So the League's position is no on Amendment 4.
Okay,
I'd like
let's-
to help to elaborate one
Sure.
thing, that little
Okay.
thing, to hang an argument on one of the points that he brought up. You know, whether you're for it or against it, one of the things that people tend to forget, when the state is buying land to conserve for whatever reason, there usually is a reason. And the reason is linked to something. It's protecting the aquifer. It's doing something. There's a reason.
Beaches
and the
or
lack
the-
of a requirement of some kind of a rational nexus, some kind of relationship to the master plan,
Right.
because there might be land that could be perpetually conserved that didn't worth conserving. You know, I mean, there's got to be a reason. And that was one of the issues that you think about and you go, well, we want to, you know, you do want to save as much land as you can, but some land, forget it. I mean, it really isn't in the public interest to give somebody a benefit to not develop it because it's worthless from the public policy perspective. So that's something that is an important thing
Right.
to bring to mind. You got to have a
Yeah.
reason to have it.
You wanted to add?
Meantime, if you get the conservation classification under this measure, you can graze your cattle on it and get taxed for that at that use, which is how we opened this up. In other words, if you get a conservation, you're going to get a tax break if you get this land designated for conservation.
Right.
But you can use it for cattle ranching, and you would only be taxed on the value of that property under an agricultural assessment.
Okay. Now, didn't we just meet, and I won't name him, with one of our state representatives who said that state has no business getting into real property taxation because this is so important, really, to local government and their revenues? Did he not say that the other day?
Yes, that's,
He did,
that's a
'cause we
popularly
were
expressed
talking
sentiment.
about-
Sure.
We were talking about the January debacle with the property tax that we voted on at that time. Remember the increase in the homestead and the decrease
Right.
in the assessments on commercial properties, to capping that, and
Right.
and so that really in effect hurt local government. That one actually
Boy, did it.
really hurt local government, although local government is certainly enjoying a long period of time of increasing property taxes.
Right.
So maybe they had that coming to them, but I don't know. But this
was
one
pretty
state
harsh.
representative said, I don't think we had business, we should not have required such a thing because it
Right.
has such an impact on local government.
Well, you can say that about any of the 4 measures that relate to taxation. They're going to reduce local government revenues if they're adopted.
Any of these 4?
Any of the 4 that
Could.
relate to taxation.
Likely
Could.
will.
Likely will.
Okay.
Which
Well,
is
I
why
don't
tax
think
lots
these
of
are
farm.
reductions, the others, when we talked about. It's just that you're not going to be able to collect more. You can't,
Right.
you can't go in here and collect more just because
Yeah.
someone's fixing their property or hardening it against storms or this kind of thing.
Well-
That's different. That isn't like
Well, if you look at the
reducing-
maximum property taxes that could be gained, these will reduce the maximum.
Okay.
Whether it's a huge reduction from what's current, but that's an argument. If one of the arguments is we should do everything we can to increase the value of all land so we can get maximum revenues, then
Right.
you'd vote no for all of these. But there's a real strong argument. Pretty complex to put into 4
Like the
amendments.
next one.
I think that, I think I should give, okay, well, no, let's see, this one. The assessment of working waterfront. Now, this is a constitutional amendment number 6. We
Number
skipped
6.
number 5. There is no number 5
Right.
because that became
Got
unconstitutional. Bounced
Right,
out of
5,
it.
7, and 9 were by the
Rejected.
Supreme
Taken
Court.
out, and they don't move the numbers up, so that's that. So we're on number 6 now, assessment of working waterfront property based on current use. I think I don't understand this, but could one of you want to take
This one here is one that came about because of the concerns that people have been having. This is the group of people that probably felt the most put upon with when our property tax rolls were really growing and property kept increasing in value. And you can have a nice little bar on a dock in Indian Rocks that's been there for 70 years, or a mom and pop motel right next to it that's been there for years and years and years, and families have been coming and staying there. They can charge low prices and everything. But because the property appraisers are required, are mandated to assess the property at the highest and best use, they would assess this little old dock with a bar or this mom and pop motel as though it was the Ritz-Carlton. And people who didn't want to get out of their businesses were getting out of their businesses. This isn't only that at the beachfront, people were feeling it probably the most than anybody else,
Right.
especially the small family-owned motels and businesses. But this is true all over the place when you get into an area that's been gentrified, and you can have an itty bitty little store there that you've had there for years, or your store, your beauty shop, or whatever, and you own a little mall that's there. But it's become gentrified, the values have gone up, you have to pay taxes on the highest and best values. And what this says is that you don't have to look at that mom and pop motel as if it's a Ritz-Carlton, that you can look at it as a mom and pop motel. And so you base the valuation on what is actually happening at the site as opposed to what the maximum value of that site would be. And so this has been a debate because you've seen all over the region, we've seen people shut down and sell businesses that they didn't want to sell, but the property just got too valuable. They
Right.
sold it and moved on.
Now, you're saying, though, that this permits you to, a property appraiser to look at it differently. It doesn't
Right.
require it.
Right. The requirement has been that the property appraiser has no discretion, must put the value of the property
At
at
its
its
highest.
highest and best. So if you could put, and marinas are another place that's
Yes, right.
disappearing. If you're a Florida boater, it's getting harder and harder to find a marina on the waterfront, and it's getting harder and harder if you trailer your boat to find a place to put your boat in the water, because a lot of the older marinas, all of the marinas, have had to go to best use, which is to put a condo there or a hotel, and even the marinas are shutting down. This allows things, this basically grandfathers waterfront property to its current use, not best use. Now, if somebody has a marina or a waterfront bar and then sells it to somebody who's going to put a condo on there, then the value goes up to the condo value. So you can't build a condo and keep your waterfront bar thing. So it's
Once
current
you've
value.
increased it,
Once
it's
you've
used,
changed it, then it goes to the next value. This also helps to maintain the Florida tradition of water use and boats, waterfront jobs. Can't really save the fishing.
Culture. The culture.
Yeah, it saves the culture. Does it then reduce the potential taxable income for the county? Yes, it does, because they can charge more if it's a condo than if it's a little marina. So this is another one of those that has the potential for reducing potential revenue for the counties. However, all in all, the league has taken a position that we are in favor of this amendment. We would like to keep the current use rather than highest and best use, primarily because it helps slow the changing or the hardening of the waterfront from the marinas and the bars and restaurants to condo. That helps provide public access to folks that aren't wealthy enough to afford a condo and have beach access that way. So it's better for public access, and it kind of helps the traditions of Florida maintain themselves as long as is possible.
These are mostly small businesses, and really your city and county people who
This
are
is
right
Rick's
there on
on
the
the river,
ground.
for example.
Yeah, this is Rick's on the river.
Little places. These are mostly small businesses, independent businesses, and many are part of the culture of what makes Florida such a special place.
True
And the
enough.
waterfront life, the oystermen. We think about our area, but even if you go up the coast and you see some of the areas,
Sure.
the fishing areas all along the west coast of Florida, these people are struggling, and they're struggling to retain the family business, and they want to do it, but it's killing them because the property value is going up so much. They have no choice but to get out of the family business.
Now, with this, would that, if they had gone in last year or in the last couple of
Right.
years and assessed it at that highest use instead of its current usage,
Right.
would they then, would this allow them to drop it back down?
I don't know. I
don't
do
know.
not know if it's retroactive. I do not know that, whether they get some taxes rebated to them. I don't know that, and reading it, that's not.
It doesn't tell you
That's not
that
talked
in there.
Although
Mark,
they assess value, they go into areas every so often and reassess, so they might implement the new rule when they went in and reassessed an area. I mean, it would make
Or
sense.
you might,
Yeah.
as the owner, be able to
I
call
don't
them
know.
in. But then who would set that? Because this is sort of a may do it, but they're not required to, correct?
No, it authorizes
It-
the assessment. When they, and your property appraisers, people get mad and say the appraiser, here's what they're supposed to do.
Right.
They're
Yeah,
supposed to give a true statement of the role. They're not supposed to do something because they want you to like them. They're supposed to give a true statement of the role, and this gives them direction on how to do that. And so I have no doubt that they would have to do that because that's what the Constitution tells them to do.
Right. Mark?
Opponents of the measure say that the devil's in the details,
Yeah.
that the state legislature will
Right.
get to decide about the conditions and limitations on any tax break. But small operators of marinas and other waterfront properties have experienced increases in their assessed valuation of up to 300% in some places. They simply cannot bear to pay a tax bill based on highest and best use. So this would indeed ensure that there's no further loss of public access to waterfront properties and allow these properties to be taxed at their current use.
Right.
It's fair, fundamentally fair to the property owner and to the public.
I know because you have so much history with this, you should do Amendment 8.
Why would I want to
Give
do
us
that?
a lead
This
with
is
that.
an interesting one. This is an interesting one.
Local option community college funding.
This is another one of those issues that comes up because people have petitioned the legislature and have felt some frustration. And then our enterprising friends in Miami-Dade County who have their own little section of the Constitution and can get things through that
They
other
have their
people
own
can't get.
section? You mean like we can have gambling? No, things
They
like
have
that.
their own
Yes.
little section of the Constitution. They had the first affordable housing statutes, and that were ever done in Florida, and were done because of that little kicker in the Constitution. But Miami-Dade does that to assist their community college there, one of the biggest community colleges in the universe. I mean, it's huge. And a lot of the other community colleges are feeling very, very frustrated with their inability to get sufficient funding under the current situation.
They do that, you
And-
mean, they levy a sales tax? Okay, good.
And
Right.
so the other community colleges, many of the other community colleges would like to have this happen. Now, the question then comes into mind, you think you want to help them. But then at the same time, you say, do we or do we not have a state community college system? Shouldn't the state be paying for its community colleges? Should not the local, it is not a local, are they local servants or are they a state asset? And they're a state asset with a local spend. So you're tearing your hair out on that one, trying to decide whether you support it or you don't. If you support it, and then the local people start putting the money in, but other community colleges don't get it around the state, then you've created inequities all over the state with your community college system. So do you want to support it and say God helps those who help themselves and give people the opportunity to do it, or not? Should the community colleges be supported by a separate local tax? And that's a big philosophical question. Should they, or should the legislature be funding its community colleges and not the local community? It's a big question.
Did the league
and
take
the
a
league
position?
is
The league has no position on this.
They
This is-
couldn't decide either, huh?
Well, couldn't decide. It's also not one that directly goes to issues of fairness and civil rights. It's more
Although
of a
it could,
funding.
as Kathy just pointed out, because, you know, if I'm in,
the league
I don't know,
punted.
Palm
The league
Beach
punted
or
like
somewhere.
almost, a lot of people have punted. A lot of people don't want to say,
I don't want
please,
to.
please, is this going to be like the lotto? That's what some people have compared this to.
Yeah.
Is this going to be like the lotto? Are we going to go ahead and say, okay, we're going to pony up some money locally, and then they're going to back it out, and we're going to have a shift in funds, and oh my, oh my, oh my.
Right.
And so a lot of people have punted because of this. Some of us say, well, if the state's not going to do it, and local people want to, well, the heck with it, vote for the doggone thing.
Well, then, don't you think if you were in a community college and you're a university, you'd want a piece of this action too after a while?
If the voters in your area vote it,
gotta be
the sales
approved.
tax has to be voted on and approved
A local option.
by your voters. So you can't, if this passes, the community college can't just run out and tack on a half-cent sales tax all over the counties that support it. And Mark, you got...
Kathy makes a great point about the lottery, and this sounds good on the face of it. You know, community colleges are the gateway to the university system. We should support them. Workforce
Everybody
improvement.
supports community colleges.
Absolutely,
Right.
we all can agree on that. But as
Motherhood.
someone who worked
Well,
for the
it's a
half-cent
good
sales
sit-
tax in
Yeah.
1996,
Not marriage, but
the
motherhood.
voters felt very burned by the experience of the Florida lottery,
Mm-hmm.
which was supposed to be, revenues from which was supposed to be an enhancement for public education. Well, that's not what happened. And it is...
What did happen?
I don't know why we don't have another Boston Tea Party, though.
Well, it became
This
a
is just
primary
one of
fund.
those other things that just, I think, well, we should bring fake oil and throw it off of ships or
This
something.
measure
I'm not
sounds good.
sure what it is, but it seems like we have been taxed to the
Well, it's a
eyeballs,
local
and then
option.
they come back and say, okay, if you want your kid in a summer program at the parks, it's now going to be $60, and you need to buy the supplies that used to be in the books that used to be provided, and by the way, we don't have enough cops in your neighborhood, so why don't you start a neighborhood watch, and P.S. we're not going to pay for sidewalks, so now when you build a house, we want you to put your own in. I'm just not exactly sure anymore who's supposed to pay for what.
This sounds good. I mean, it's a
sounds
local
good.
option tax. Voters
Okay.
locally approve it. It has to be renewed in 5 years, grandfathers after 5 years. But it's the state's responsibility to fund that community college system. Personally, I
It
think
is.
this lets the state off the hook. I think
That's
it
what I'm
looks
saying,
good
that
and
we
it
keep
feels
letting them
good,
off
and
the hook.
who can
Yeah.
argue with this? And, you know, sales tax are paid by everybody, not only residents, but visitors and tourists and so on. It's all sounds good, but you got to get it passed, and I think it lets the state off the hook.
Except that
And then
right
don't-
now, they're hurting, everybody's hurting, and it just seems like this is an opportunity to let those who want to help themselves. And so that's why there's so many people who are schizoid about it and can't make a decision about what
Right.
they want to do, because they want to do it. There's 10 reasons that they want to do it. But the one reason that people go is exactly what you said. Is it taking the pressure off the legislature? But at the same time, those of us who support education so strongly are saying, these are people's lives you're dealing with here. And our community college is going to be able to start closing the door. They have an open door policy now that it's becoming increasingly difficult for them to afford that with the lack of funding that they're getting in the current fiscal situation. So that's why everyone's struggling with this one. This is probably the hardest one on the ballot. Number 2 is the one that everybody's bad the most, because it's so, you can be colorful when you're talking about this one. This one goes right to your heart, because it's not easy to say yes or no to it, because a lot of people who are saying no to it really want it. And if
They want increased funding.
If they felt like there was
They
enough
just-
state funding and this would be gravy, they'd say go for it. But they're worried that it's going to be, this is going to come in and then their dollars are going to be backed out.
Well, until our state changes where we get our income from, I mean, you know, we're so tourist-based and building-based and that kind of thing. We're, you know, at times like this where we are right now, economically, we're going to be hurting, right?
Well, there are traditionally things that the state has paid for, and the community colleges have been one of them. They also pay for highway patrol, they pay for the state wildlife officers, and part of that is the slippery slope here is if the state's going to stop paying or not paying adequately and pass it on, do we start then arguing about how many state wildlife officers we're going to support by a local sales tax and highway patrol and highways? It's a slippery slope when you start letting the state pass responsibilities that have traditionally been the state's off to somebody else.
Right.
And
that's what I was meaning earlier when I said, you know, we've privatized schools and then we've not supplied enough police so that we have to have neighborhood watch. You know, these kinds of things have been picked up by citizens more and more, even though we still have seen increases in our taxes in so many ways. We only have about 5 minutes left of our program, 4 minutes, he just said. And so I want to give each of you a couple of minutes to, I know Kathy pointed out, and I actually wanted to have this conversation, but you know, you need to study stuff before you go and take a look, and I'm afraid there's a lot of people that not only with these amendments, but also with the people we're voting on.
Well, you've got a local issue too that's not part of this, but
Oh, yeah.
the ELAP.
Oh, the ELAP. Let's,
Yeah,
oh,
that's
yeah,
not-
quickly.
That's not.
That's right. I got a
that's-
call. I got a robocall from former Governor Martinez yesterday over the weekend. Please vote for ELAP. I thought that was very
And
good.
that was
don't
great
you?
of him to do that, and that's very good advice, and you should take the advice of Governor Mayor Martinez.
Governor Mayor, right? Is that the guy that hired you originally or something or other? I think or.
You
something
should
like
take
that.
the advice of good, he's a
right,
wonderful
we're
public
gonna give you a
policy
minute.
person, and ELAP, to keep Hillsborough County one of the best
And you're with
land
that?
purchases. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And on these other ones, nobody cares about my opinion, and I really just did my description of what's going on, not what I'm going to do necessarily, but on that one, I'm proud to say, yeah.
All right.
Mark, why don't
Okay,
you go
we
and
got a
I'll wrap
minute.
up
We
with the
just got a
positions.
minute left here, so.
Gee, the headline on this could read, remove Jim Crow from the Constitution, don't put marriage in.
That's a good one.
Right.
And, you know, as far as
And
I'm
keep the
concerned.
And
bars
while
open on
you're
the
at
beach.
it,
Right.
Bars open on the
Keep the
beach.
keep
beach
the
bars
bars open on the beach, and please, please, please let me put some shutters on my house.
Like a lot of people, I'm going to wrestle with the local sales tax option for community colleges. I have a youngster who's ready
hard.
to enroll, and I'm keenly aware of how that will prepare her for a university education. So I'll probably deliberate on that until November 4th. But we need to get this archaic language out of the Constitution. That's in Amendment 1, and I'm opposed to Amendment 2. I think it's a Trojan horse.
Last words?
League of Women Voters of Hillsborough County, as you see, males and females, we are invested in improving education of voters, and we
That's right.
support the democratic process. We don't support candidates or parties. Anybody is welcome to join us. Come Google us, find our website. We'll be delighted to have you join us.
League of Women Voters of
Hillsborough
Hillsborough
County.
County. Kathy, parting words?
I say amen to what he said.
All
Their
right.
League of Women Voters has
Amen.
been...
Look,
really,
she says amen.
amen.
A female
Yeah. No,
women voters.
When I look to the League, because I know people have studied these issues, and it really, I don't always necessarily agree, even though I've been a League member forever, but it gives me some understanding and helps me make an intelligent decision instead of just a whimsical one.
Thanks very much for
Thank you, Louise.
coming down here and taking the time to go over this with our viewers. I know they're all going to appreciate it, and we're going to run this program several times between now and voting day so that maybe they can be better apprised and have better information. And plus, any of the League forums that we get to do, we do appreciate everything.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
Fair enough.
Appreciate it. Thank you
You
so
bet.
much.
Thank you.
And thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Appreciate it.
A few years ago, Eric Oberman was a healthy college student. Then ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, took away his ability to move, speak, and breathe on his own. That is why the ALS Association has created Treat ALS, a program to accelerate drug discovery and clinical trials leading to new therapies in ALS.
People like me, people with ALS, need your help.
With your support, we can triumph over ALS.
Hear the one about the mom and the mechanic? They made a big splash running a car wash. See, the local PTA, an auto body shop, and their community coalition organized car washes, raising money to expand after-school programs. They knew keeping kids busy keeps them away from drugs. So now the town's got clean cars and clean kids. What can your group do? Contact your community coalition at helpyourcommunity.org, because you get more
when you get together.
I'm sick of this. I'm sick of dealing with you. I'm sick of
I work 6 days a week. Who do you think you
Stand
are?
up straight. Don't you ever talk back to me again. You just shut up.
What are you crying about? What?
What a child learns about violence, a child learns for life. Teach carefully. We can show you how. Act against violence. Call 877-ACT-WISE for a free brochure.
Things can get pretty ugly when you're bored. In an after-school program, you can find something way better to do.